Here is every major Clash Royale exploit explained. I do not condone knowingly exploiting a bug or glitch to your advantage. You gotta be careful, it can get you banned, but don't worry, all of these in this video have been patched. The Lucky Drop Glitch. In March 2024, shortly after the Lucky Drop update, players noticed that Supercell had overlooked a simple trick to re-roll their rewards. By simply putting their phone in airplane mode before opening a Lucky Drop, you could open it, and if you didn't like the reward, close the game, turn airplane mode off, reopen the game, and the Lucky Drop would still be there to open again. And then rinse and repeat, and because of the way it works, you get a different reward every single time. Players were using this method to get rare items or the exact cards they wanted, and this quickly got out of control. Tutorials were being posted online, and those who abused the glitch were progressing like crazy, and this went on for about 3 weeks. However, on April 12th, the gig was finally up, and about 800 accounts were temporarily banned, and some of those were permanent. But 4 days later, they were all converted to temporary bans. Since then, they have changed the way these chests function. Zero Cycle Evo. In the summer of 2023, shortly after evolutions were added, some players were getting into matches where it seemed like the player they were facing was using evolutions right off the rip. Obviously, that's not how they were supposed to work, and the cycle count is what made Evos balanced, so this was pretty horrific. It was a major problem. At the time, a player named Milo the Great, a bug hunter, explained that this was possible because the cycles of evolved cards were handled by the client. In other words, on your phone rather than the server. So all you had to do was open up the game files and change this cycle counter to 0. It was that easy. It's unknown exactly how long players knew of this exploit, but it was fixed by at least August 20th, 2023, which was a couple months after evolutions were added. Backdooring. In December 2022, there was a bug that allowed you to essentially teleport any card wherever you wanted, but most commonly to the King Tower to get a Insta 3 crown, which is why it got the name Backdooring. It was quite easy. You placed a spell anywhere, and then you drag that mirrored spell to wherever you wanted. And while you were holding it, deploy a card of your choice, then let go of the mirrored spell, and voila! That card would magically appear where you were holding that mirrored spell. This was caused by the mirror updating the card it was mirroring while you were holding it. So even though it said it was going to mirror the spell, it would actually mirror your last played card. It took a little practice to get right, but of course, some sweaty players got really good at it and started to abuse it in Trophy Road, Path of Legends, challenges, anywhere where they could gain a competitive advantage or grind those rewards. Before 2022 wrapped up, it had already been patched and it doesn't seem like anyone was banned for it. Clan bombing. In April 2024, some clans were essentially disabled after someone in that clan shared a deck link. Now this deck link was special because it was missing a card, and apparently you could do this by removing that card as you clicked the share menu. And as soon as you shared it to the clan, your game would crash and everyone in that clan couldn't get back on because their chat had this bugged out deck. But get this, you could join any clan and do this. People would create an alt account, then join a clan of their choice and bomb it. They were targeting clans. That's how it became known as clan bombing. You could take down any clan. And according to several online posts, they were locked out anywhere from a few hours to a few days. What made this worse is that there was a fake video of community manager at the time, Drew, sharing how to do the glitch. It's so kind of a developer to tell us how to do it.
Simply go to your deck page, select a card, and tap remove at the same time you press the share menu. If you do it right, the option to share the deck to clan chat should be available. Press the button to do so, and nobody in your clan will ever be able to play the game again.
It was clearly fake, but some people believed it and got curious and tried it. This was patched a couple weeks into April, and no one was banned for it. Hidden Tower HP. In July 2020, many top players were joining clans with odd names. The purpose of this was because the clan names were glitched to where they were really tall. In a match, it would end up covering their left tower's HP, And of course, in a competitive setting, everything matters, including knowing your opponent's tower HP. It didn't take long to where these clans started to multiply, and this went on for quite a while. This screenshot right here is from 2 years after this began. I believe what Supercell was doing was changing the clan's name or banning it altogether instead of fixing the issue. Eventually though, they did stop appearing, so one can assume it's been patched for several years at this point. 1 card glitch, also known as 8 card glitch. So this one popped up 4 times in the game's history, and every time the method was completely different. But all of them resulted in the same thing, a deck full of 1 card that was obviously pretty busted in some cases and was being exploited for a competitive advantage. So the first time this was discovered was in May 2018, and basically you'd copy the link to the deck and then paste it into like a notepad. Then you'd edit the numbers in the link. Every number represented a specific card, so you could just copy and paste that 1 code 8 times, or have duplicates of whichever card you wanted. It was pretty customizable, and players were even sharing spreadsheets with all the codes. Once you were done, you'd open the link, and then you'd have your modified deck in the game. This was patched fairly quick, and a number of players did receive 1-week bans for doing it. In mid-2020, after it was now possible to remove a card from a deck, you could do this by holding the number of the incomplete deck and tapping on the challenges screen and quickly starting a battle. Community manager at the time did advise against doing it, saying that it was considered an exploit. In September 2021, this one was for 2v2, and basically with the help of a 2v2 friend, after a match, you pressed play again, the other player would exit, and during that time, you'd quickly switch to that 1 card deck before they accepted the play again request. And you go into battle like that with that deck. And finally, in July 2024, this glitch would pop up again. This time it involved messing with the game files. A few players did abuse the crap out of this one to get to the leaderboards, grind some grand challenges, and push in the global tournament at the time. This one did also result in a number of bans, and the global tournament issues were handled. 2v2 disconnect. In June 2025, there was yet another bug that summer, this time for the 2v2 League game mode. 2 days before the season ended, a bunch of players were going around intentionally causing their opponents to disconnect, and they couldn't get back on until the match was over. The game would crash every time you tried to get back on, so you just had to wait to get 3 crowns. Apparently, the way they were doing it was 2 players that were not friends, this was important, would start a 2v2 match via the clan. They'd play normally, and during that match, someone in the clan would kick both of them out. And then when they tapped play again for another match, the match would crash for anyone who matched up against them. This led to the leaderboards once again being ruined by a bunch of no-lifes. The culprit was a bugged out play again button, basically, which is why a maintenance actually disabled the button temporarily. Shortly after, a bunch of people were banned as well, and the button was re-enabled. Supercard exploit. This glitch from July 2014 was a pretty crazy one. It not only let you play with supercards and challenges, but also unreleased cards. So, of course, there were players exploiting this to get easy wins in classic and grand challenges. You'd see them playing all kinds of supercards that are normally only available in very specific challenges, and like I said, unreleased cards as well. Cards like this barrel, which gave you elixir faster than the regular pump, a special 1 elixir lightning, all kinds of crazy stuff. The person who found this bug said that this was possible because Supercell had been accidentally adding all kinds of vulnerabilities, so he was able to go into the game files and make decks with cards that were in the game but unavailable. Even though he said that he did not share his methods, somehow many other players were also using this exploit, and apparently what they were doing was passing around a bugged out deck link with all of these cards, and it worked in challenges. This led to a few bans, and by July 14th it was patched. Little Prince clone glitch. Back in November 2023, there was a bug where if you cloned the Little Prince, then immediately activated its ability, it would spawn 2 full health guardians. It wasn't a clone, it was just spawning 2 normal ones. Obviously, that wasn't supposed to happen, and it was pretty busted, which is why the Little Prince and clone became a very popular combination at the time, and it was understandably making unaware players upset, especially how the Little Prince was already OP at the time by itself, and this glitch just made it 10 times worse. It took about a week to fix this issue, and to my knowledge, no one was banned for it. Infinite Elixir, also known as Zero Elixir. In October 2025, a player named generic name 1911 rose to the #1 spot in the leaderboards and was absolutely destroying players in challenges. This was no insane skill. Instead, he had found a way to make all cards 0 elixir. So he could essentially deploy everything one after the other, and obviously there was no way to defend that. It wasn't just him. There was a lot of footage floating around of other random players having access to this exploit. Was it just him with another account, or was it multiple people that he was selling it to? Who knows? He explained the reason the exploit worked was that after a recent Clash Royale update, they swapped some security checks from the server to the client, which allowed him to change all of the values of all the cards elixir to 0 or anything that he wanted. And since the game was relying on the client for those security checks, it didn't think anything of it. Obviously, he was banned, but he then returned in January 2026, showing that Supercell failed to fix the issue. So he climbed back up the leaderboards and showed that it also worked in merge tactics. He had infinite elixir there. Fake Graveyard. This is the most recent on the list, and it involves the same guy as the last one. Generic name. Well, allegedly anyway, he said this was his work. This time, fake graveyards that spawns nothing. You'd see them do their whole animation and sound, but no skeletons would pop up. The point of this was to trick players to countering nothing. And then they would spawn a real graveyard after they had baited out your counter on the fake one. Like the last exploit, it seems this one was potentially shared with other players so that they can cheese some matches. And this was most likely done with the same methods, editing the game files, checking for vulnerabilities that the game isn't really paying attention to. These accounts always get permanent bans, but of course, nothing stops them from making new accounts. Lag switch. Back in January 2022, there was a player with this name, a bunch of squares. He was going around getting a bunch of 3 crowns and not losing any matches. In the top 200. Kinda weird, right? Now maybe he just had a good gaming chair, but no. Apparently what was going on is that he was somehow causing players he faced to be unable to do anything most of the time. So dropping cards to defend his push would not really work. I mean, sometimes it would with a 15-second delay, and so pretty much all you could do was watch this guy 3 crown you. Allegedly, he was also selling his methods to other players who never touched grass. Unfortunately, there's not really a solid explanation here. I know this is a explained video, sorry for the clickbait, but it is largely believed it was caused by him DDoSing his opponents. Maybe not exactly that, but in some form or another, some kind of lag switch, which is where it gets its name from. But some say that's impossible in a game like Clash Royale, so I'm not 100% sure. This has occurred before this incident, and it also still occurs today. Now, this is not just a lagging out situation. If you see the Wi-Fi symbol, this is not that. But anyway, this has typically resulted in the players abusing this getting banned, but Supercell has never publicly said anything about it. Faster seasonal chests. In November 2025, during Season 77, players uncovered a way to reset the max seasonal chests for the Calling All Hogs event by going to the Musketeer Mayhem event, going into the settings, and switching personalized offers off and on, and reloading the game. This would essentially reset the tracked progress for the challenge for some reason. Like, what on earth does that have to do with that? I don't know. And so in the Calling All Hogs event, you'd unlock more chests. It obviously wasn't unlimited, it only worked in this event, and throughout the season, you could complete the event without the glitch, but this was just a faster way to do it. There were a few concerns about being banned for this, however, nothing came out of it. Tournament refund scam. This was more of a scam, but I thought this was an appropriate video to mention it because players were exploiting a feature to their advantage. So it fits the bill. In 2016, when tournaments had just been added, there was this thing where if you started a tournament and no one joined, you'd get your gems back. Unfortunately, some players started to use this to scam people. They'd make a invite-only tournament and in the description say that the password was in some website. Oftentimes, the website led to one of those never-ending surveys that they had to complete. And you know, if you've ever done one of those, they usually ask for your credit card information at some point or another. They're scams. And it was a giant mess because players were just looking for genuine tournaments to join, and the tournament browse feature in the game was flooded with these. Eventually that year, they removed this refunding feature, and to my knowledge, no one was banned for it, but it is possible that there were some bans. Infinite skeletons. This one is really old. I'm talking like the first week the game was available old, January 2016. At that time, there was a small glitch that went viral. It was basically where you put a witch in the corner and then quickly placed a building right against her, essentially blocking her in. For the rest of the match, she'd continue to spawn skeletons, and if you or the opponent didn't have a direct spell to counter that witch, well, you're out of luck. You just gotta deal with it. Now, no one was banned for this. In fact, players were using this in the leaderboards, and it didn't seem like Supercell was that concerned. They eventually fixed it, and that was it. Early 2016 was really like the Wild West days of Clash Royale. A lot of things slipped through the cracks, but in the end, it was all fun and games. Rigged matchmaking. Pack win challenges were first added to the game in the fall of 2016. Like everything else that is new, players eventually started to tinker around with it, seeing how matchmaking worked. And when someone asked Supercell, how exactly does this work? They responded, it's based on wins. But then they found something. If you started a couple casual challenges and lost at least 6 games in a row, if you then started a grand challenge, your matchups would be significantly easier, thus rigging the matchmaking in your favor. And you could keep doing this, with the only downside being the number of casual matches you needed to lose increased after every successful grand challenge. At least that's what everyone's testing concluded. This was eventually fixed soon after, and developers did comment on this inside this Q&A, the same one from earlier. I pulled this from the Wayback Machine, but unfortunately the actual reply of them acknowledging the issue seems to be lost through time. Rocket immunity. I guess calling it that was a bit of a stretch because it only worked if the circumstances were right. So basically, in 2016, shortly after the Ice Golem was added, there was a bug where if an Ice Golem was near any troop and a rocket hit them, the Ice Golem would go down, but not the troop near it. In fact, that troop didn't take any damage at all. This was caused by the Ice Golem's slowdown aura, somehow shielding all of the damage. So any troop that was in that aura would survive. This quickly started to be abused, as at the time the Expo was pretty popular, and so was the rocket because it was a direct counter to the Expo. So Expo players started to bring an Ice Golem and dropping it near their Expo, and the other player, unaware of the bug, would completely waste their elixir countering it with a rocket that wasn't going to do anything. Based on gameplay that was uploaded at the time, this went unpatched for well over a month, which was unfortunately typical for 2016. Things moved a lot slower. Buffed chest. In May 2024, after some regular old balance changes, every chest in the game suddenly became insanely buffed. I'm talking like players were pulling dozens of champions and hundreds of legendaries in single chests. How on earth does balance changes cause that? Who knows? This was exploited for a short time. When players caught wind of it, they went out and opened every chest they had available. However, a lot of players were cautious because just 2 months prior, a bunch of people had gotten banned for the lucky drop glitch. Anyway, about a week later, they announced they were reverting the excess rewards, including downgrading any cards that were upgraded during the time and giving back all of the chests that were opened so that they could reopen them normally. No one was banned, of course, as most people just ran into it by accident. Probably just thought it was a really lucky day. Elixir Spectating. This has been a thing since the game launched. It's basically just grabbing a second device and spectating the current match so that you can see the elixir of your opponent. This obviously gave you a competitive advantage if you want to put that much effort in doing so, and you bet competitive players were all over it for years. That's where it gets complicated though, because Supercell was well aware of it for 9 years and did absolutely nothing about it. So since 2016, players have debated if this is even considered an exploit. However, in the summer of 2025, it was announced that they were finally getting rid of the elixir bar in live spectating, but only in ranked and challenges, which is where it mattered the most. Building displacement. This is a pretty fun glitch that has been unpatched since the dawn of time. I mean, every now and then there is a patch for a specific card, but it always comes back one way or another. This is basically when you fill your side with too many buildings to the point where if you spawn one too many, it would spawn in the corner of the other side. So you could have some goofy things going on, like an inferno melting your opponent's tower. Obviously, this wasn't something you could really exploit in a real match. However, it was actually possible to do in real touchdown matches. You only needed to place a few buildings, and then you could force spawn royal recruits on the other side. And if you know how touchdown works, that basically secured you the win every time. But if you were good at doing it. So even though it was exploitable, it was a lot of effort, so I don't think this ever caught on, and as you could probably guess, no one was banned for it. So yeah, that is every major Clash Royale exploit explained. I did leave out some troop-specific glitches that were exploited on a smaller scale, mostly because they were small and there were a lot of them. I mostly wanted to focus on the big exploits, the crazy ones, you know? With that said, hope you all enjoyed, but hey, YouTube thinks you'll like this next video, so why don't you check it out? Maybe they're right and you will like it. As always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!